Hey everybody, let's talk about something that I think doesn't get talked about nearly as much, and that's how lonely the lives of people who can be who have a lot of anxiety, and how anxiety drives people to a life of being alone, to a life of isolation, and feeling lonely. Now that doesn't mean that everyone who's alone is alone because they're anxious and they feel lonely. No, not at all. But we recognize that there's definitely a relationship in play here, especially for students. So without further ado, let's talk about anxiety and let's talk about loneliness. I want you to imagine there's an individual, he's young, 18, 19, 20, he's going to college, going to university, but he doesn't go out to parties much. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even go to like a co-workers get-together, like a co-workers party. Or even if his classmates are saying, hey, let's come on over to so-and-so's house, it's a small gathering, he won't go. Why? Well, he's thinking maybe I say something stupid, or I feel uncomfortable. I don't know these people. I don't know if they're gonna like me. I don't know if they'll laugh at my jokes. Maybe they're gonna think I'm weird. Maybe their grades are really good. They're gonna think I'm not smart enough, or vice versa. Their grades aren't too good. Maybe they think like I'm a nerd or something. I don't want to be the outcast, so I'm just not gonna go. So when you don't go once, twice, 3 times, what if it turns into a habit? And every time you get invited out, you go, yep, not for me. I don't feel comfortable. I feel much more comfortable staying at home and watching TV or scrolling on my phone. So what happens? If we continue to do this over time, we can start experiencing or having feelings of loneliness. To say that one of the fundamentals of human life is connection, is intimate relationship with others, I would say that is, you cannot dispute that claim. There's a very, very abundance amount of evidence that suggests we need relationships in our lives. And not only that, but we need to socialize. Like, we need to talk to people. Now, that might look different for different people. Some might have to party once a week, once every 2 weeks. Some might just have to see a close friend once every 2 weeks, or whatever. But we recognize that this is such an integral part of being a human. And people think, oh, well, I've got all these expectations about what college is supposed to be. And in the movies, they go out to the parties and, she meets her boyfriend or he meets his girlfriend or whatever. And this is what it's supposed to be like for me. All of a sudden, you go to college and university. Maybe you've moved out. Maybe you're living in a dorm. And you're like, I just want to be by myself. Why? Because I don't feel as anxious compared to going out and meeting someone new. So you stay by yourself, and guess what? You start having those feelings of loneliness. It'd be nice if I could hang out with someone. I miss having fun with people. I want to go and experience these things. I just don't know how to do it. And the problem is, if you tell people this, they'll kind of look at you funny and they'll say, dude, just do it. You just have to do it. And that's the right thing to do. Like, in your head, you're like, yeah, I know I just have to get out there, but I don't think I want to. In other words, there's a decision to make, right? I think about going outside, going to a party. That makes me feel anxious, so I avoid it. If you listen to last week's episode, this is going to make a lot more sense. So I avoid it. The anxiety temporarily goes away. But over time, I start to develop feelings of loneliness. And now, that starts to suck, and I think, well, what can I do? What can I do to stop feeling loneliness? Maybe I start smoking. Maybe I start playing an excessive amount of video games. Maybe pornography. I have to do something. I have to throw my head into something so that I don't feel lonely anymore. So what can I do that can replicate that kind of social connection without actually going out and meeting somebody? One of the reasons I bring up things like pornography and like OnlyFans, and one of the more interesting videos I've made about pornography, they've got this idea where if I approach a very attractive person, or just a cool person, a person that I find cool and a little intimidating, what are the chances of rejection? There could be a decent amount. If I'm watching pornography, what are the chances of rejection? 0. I can see whoever I want to, listen to whoever I want to, and I think OnlyFans is so interesting because it's tapping into that thing where I believe like there's subscription based and whatnot, and I don't know if Like, can you request things? I bet you could. I bet you could probably be like, hey, I'll pay you X amount of money if you make a specific video for me. And I want you to say my name and I want you blah, blah, blah. So you become more tailored to the individual. So these are ways that we can kind of bypass or find a loophole in that. I still want these feelings of intimacy. I'm not going to go out. I'm not getting them elsewhere. So I'm going to pay this content creator online to get those feelings. Like I just want to feel loved, or whatever it may be. I just want to talk to somebody. Now, when you ask that person, you go, well, why don't you just go out? If you feel lonely, why don't you just go to that party? They'll say, look, the anxiety is so bad, I would rather stay in. So now you've got a choice to make. You're sitting there, whether as a student, as a young person, and you're going, well, what's worse? The anxiety of going to that party, or the feelings of loneliness when I stay home? And you're going, Daniel, both suck. But the question is, which one would you rather do? And there's a lot of people listening to this who go, look, I hear what you're saying, Dan, but I will gladly pick feelings of loneliness over the feeling of anxiety. And my question to you, if that's you, is how long have you been doing this for? And how long will you continue living like this for? And I want you to think about that. Because telling people, oh, you just have to go out and meet people, or you have to initiative, you have to take charge, you gotta, the thing that they say, get rejected 100 times, then you don't feel rejection anymore. It depends. If that person's in a place where they're going, it's not worth it, I'd rather feel lonely over feeling anxious, maybe it doesn't make sense to go out. So unfortunately, people who experience high amounts of anxiety are more likely to avoid those things. And when they avoid those things, you get those feelings of loneliness. So guess what happens? You don't go to that party. Why? Because you're anxious. You might get embarrassed. You don't know anyone there. It's probably not even going to be fun. So you stay home. And the next couple of nights, you're at home, you're scrolling on Instagram, and what do you see? You see people out at parties. You see people out at that party. Do you see that guy you're attracted to at that party talking to another girl that isn't you? Now how do you feel? Maybe not just lonely, but now sad. Maybe you feel angry. Maybe you feel frustrated at yourself. Like one of the things Sigmund Freud had said many years ago, he said, depression is anger turned towards the self. And I want you to think about that for a second. Depression is anger turned towards the self, because so much so we can be angry and frustrated, but you ask someone, what are you frustrated about? And sometimes they'll talk to you externally, like, I'm mad that this thing happened, I'm mad that there's this party. And a lot of times it's internal. And people will say, I'm ashamed of myself. I feel guilty for not going to that party. I'm so anxious that I don't want to go, and then when I don't go, I feel guilty. And I beat myself up over it. So I have to get my mind off. So I'm going to start eating chocolates and scrolling on social media. But then I scroll on social media and I see those people at the party. And I remember not going. And I feel even worse. And the cycle perpetuates. It's really sad, and it's hard to articulate it to someone who doesn't have high levels of anxiety. Once again, I would argue everyone feels anxious from time to time. But what I've found in my own experience is that the level of anxiety, the potency, the strength, the intensity differs drastically. There are some people that would say, look, I'm going to a party. I'm going to see a bunch of friends. Cool. I'm going to meet a bunch of strangers. Cool. Doesn't think twice about it, goes. Some people think, I'm going to go to a party. There's going to be some strangers. I feel a little bit of anxiety, but I think it's going to be fun. They go. Another person says, I'm going to go to a party. It'll be fun, but I'm terrified. And they might go sit in their car or stand outside the door for 10 minutes rehearsing in their head. Okay, I'm going to knock on the door. Someone's going to open. What am I going to say? What are they going to say? Okay, when I go in, who am I going to talk to first? Oh my God, hopefully I'm dressed right. And after that rehearsal of 10 or 15 minutes, then they head in. Then you have the people who don't go to the party at all. And folks, I don't want this to be a thing of like, we're being called out because we're not socializing enough. There's a difference between I'm not doing it because I don't want to versus, and this is a sneaky one, I'm not doing it Because I don't think I can. I don't think I can. Like, the anxiety is too much. And that's why I'm not going. You could have 3 or 4 classmates that just want to hang out after classes. And the anxiety of what are they going to say? Am I going to look stupid? Can I contribute to the conversation? Might be enough to go, look, I don't want to hang out. But if we don't have a dialogue on this, if they're stigmatized, well, guess what those people are going to think? Oh, Daniel's not a people person. Daniel doesn't come to the parties. He doesn't talk to us. He doesn't try to make conversation with us. And it can be perceived as Daniel doesn't care. Or I'm not a priority for him. Right? Or Daniel's rude, or Daniel's a jerk. I've seen this happen in front of my own eyes. Sometimes there's individuals whom, let's say, I've wanted to talk to, and for one reason or another, it looks like they ignored me. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's weird. Is that have something to do with me? Or something to do with something that's not related to me at all? They feel anxious about something. But if we're not aware of the influence that anxiety has on us, a lot of those behaviors can come off as rude or uninterested or not a priority. There's a lot of women who don't realize, like, okay, imagine you're a woman, you're young, you're in a club, you're dancing, you're having fun. One guy approaches you, whatever, you dance with him or you turn him down. Like, you don't recognize, for every one man that approaches you, and I don't want to give out a number because this is not a study, but it's definitely a couple of people, a couple of guys that have been looking at you all night. Like, if one approaches you, if 2 approach you, like, there's so many guys that have seen you that haven't approached you because of maybe anxiety. And then you might process that as, oh, I guess they're not interested. If they don't approach me, I guess they're not interested. Right? Not recognizing, or maybe not caring about the fact that it can be so anxiety-provoking to get rejected. And then with that poor guy who asks you for a dance, let's say he gets rejected, everyone else is going, well, thank God I didn't go up there. Well, goodness, I'd just rather be lonely in the corner by myself on my phone while everyone else is dancing. We could do the reverse. The guy in class who, maybe there's a guy who you like. And you're not the most highly extroverted girl. So you kind of sit in the back and you hope that one day he just notices you. Like, look, I feel super anxious talking to men, but one day he's just going to come over and start a conversation with me. So then you sit there and hope. And then maybe you smile at him. And maybe you look at him in the eyes and you're like, please read my mind. Please come talk to me. Right? And the guy goes right over his head. The amount of stories I've heard of female friends of mine who've been interested in a guy but have never approached him. Like, it goes something like, like, man, I find that guy attractive. Why don't you go talk to him? No, I'm not going to do that. That, like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from guys and from girls. And when we don't do that, the other person's forced to go, oh, I guess they're not interested. So a lot of the times, being overly anxious, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. Because that internal feeling can manifest itself in many different ways. And one of the biggest ones is avoidance. And another way to think about it is withdrawal, right? If you're anxious, you're not going to be the center of attention. You don't feel comfortable cracking a joke or telling the story. You're dancing in the middle of the dance floor. You want to protect yourself at all times. So you're back. You're kind of reserved. So the question becomes, if you feel very anxious, and if it's to a point where you're having feelings of loneliness, the question becomes, what would you rather have? Would you rather be stuck with the feelings of loneliness, or would you rather approach the things that make you anxious? Now, people listening to this, they're going, well, Daniel, it's super obvious. Approach the things that make me anxious, gradual desensitization. If I do it over and over again, I'll become less and less anxious. And you're right, there is truth to that. But the question becomes, is that something that you want to do? Because that's very uncomfortable and it's not going to be easy. And if you're listening to this going, Daniel, I'm listening to everything you're saying, but I would still rather feel lonely than feel anxious temporarily. And that's an important point. Feel lonely to be determined for as long as I do this versus temporarily feel anxious. Or here's a different way to think about it. Do I want to be temporarily anxious or anxious forever? If I avoid the thing that makes me anxious, I'm not learning how to manage my anxiety. If every time I get invited to go out or to talk to somebody and I say no, I'm avoiding that thing, which means I'll be anxious. I'm anxious 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. But if I approach it, it'll be very anxiety-inducing, but I will become less anxious over time. Look, folks, if there's one final thing that I want to leave you off with is this. Unfortunately, it has been my understanding, my perspective, that there's a lot of people whose self-efficacy is really low. In other words, they underestimate their strength, their intelligence, their grit. You're better than you think you are. You're more resilient than you think you are. Like, there's a lot of people thinking, I could never do that. But even though you've clung on to that belief so tightly, there's a lot of things that are not true. There's a lot of beliefs that you hold on to that you could do, and that are limiting beliefs. And I don't know if it's a parent, I don't know if it's a counselor or something, but it's important. And like, I can't tell you that, right? Like me telling you, hey, you're smarter than you think you are. Like, yeah, thanks, Dan, that's kind. But, and then you're going to start thinking about all the reasons why you disagree with me. Because you got to come to that conclusion. You're braver than you think you are. You're more confident than you think you are. But as long as you think, I'm too anxious to do this, you won't even try it. When I was 18 and graduating from high school, my quote in the yearbook, this was years ago, was, I took this from someone, you are what you think you are. If you believe that you're an anxious person, why go out to parties? I'm destined to be lonely forever. However, if you think you are a person who has anxiety just like everybody else, even though your anxiety can be more intense than other people's, you don't always have to be that. Like, you and your anxiety aren't intertwined. You are not your emotion. You're you, and you experience a plethora of emotions. And some of them, we don't want to experience an intense amount of the emotion, but we don't want its complete absence either. And if you thought to yourself, instead of saying, I am an anxious person, if an individual could change that thought to, I am working on bettering my anxiety. I'm working on managing my anxiety. I'm learning to cope with my anxiety. Folks, doesn't that sound so much more empowering? The first way to put it, they're saying I'm an anxious person, there's no hope in that. There's no going forward. You can't get any better. You are what you are, so why try? But if you believe, and every literature evidence points to this, that we can improve, that we can get better with practice, we can learn to increase our emotional intelligence, we can increase our emotional regulation. But it takes time. But if I don't think that's possible, and this is going to something known as growth mindset, if I don't think I can get any better at it, well, I'm not going to spend time doing it. So it's a matter of, is this something that you are willing to address? Do you believe that addressing it can be worthwhile, can be helpful? And if so, you have to make a plan. You can't just talk about, okay, the next time I go invited out to a party, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to stick around for at least 15 minutes. The next time I'm in a grocery store, I'm going to go up to someone, anybody, a random person that I've never met before, I'm going to ask them for the time. I'm going to go, excuse me, hi, sorry, my phone's ran out of battery. Could you tell me what time it is? Well, what time is it right now? Boom, that's it. That's all. Or go up to someone working. Excuse me, could you point to the mangoes for me? Where the mangoes look? Obviously, do it to someone working there, not just a random person. But for that one, go up to someone who's working there. Excuse me, could you point me towards the mangoes? Or where are the avocados? Where's your ice cream section? So we got to make a very specific and attainable plan so that we can back up what we say about anxiety and wanting to feel less lonely. It's not something you're going to do overnight. It's not something you can even do in a week or 2 weeks. It's going to take a lot of practice. The important thing is be patient with yourself. Be kind, but also when necessary, be a drill sergeant. Push yourself. I feel uncomfortable when doing X. That's okay. You don't have to feel comfortable to do it anyway. Thanks, everybody. Take care.